So we're going to have one closeout from Carl Edwards, who has written part of the introductions, and then I'm going to invite people to have some chocolate cake.
Having this conversation with Grace now, Alice Jennings and myself, for quite a long time, over 16 years. And with Grace, as Donald just said, conversations always are sharp because she leaves you with questions. And she leaves you to find answers to those questions. And so we started down this path with Grace, Alice, and myself right after Jimmy passed. In fact, I still recall Grace calling me, Donald, and saying, "Jimmy's leaving. If you want to say your goodbyes, come over." And I came over with him in his last hours. And sitting there watching this great man, as you all know, who were there with us at the time, he had oxygen, and watching him take his last breaths was profound in any number of ways. Profound in the sense that the great man, his presence was leaving us. And when that happens, in addition to everything else, you got to figure how you're going to close those gaps that he leaves. And that was one of the most profound questions as I sat there with him in his bedroom. How are we going to fill these gaps? How are we going to hold it together so that the next generation will be this transmission belt for the next generation? And we know that we can't do it just by word of mouth or individually. It's not effective. You got to build institutions. And so out of those conversations ultimately with Grace, Jay, Rick, and the rest of us has, Grace, you got to write a book. Grace, you got to write a book. But also out of those conversations was the creation of the Boggs Center to nurture community leadership. And that was specific to me because Grace always asked, how did you become what you became, this outsider to this attorney? And not just an attorney, but attorney on the side of people. So we said we need an institution to make this happen. And I still remember the founding meeting with many of us around, who are here around this room, Jim Jackson, Donald and Alice and Shay and Rick and myself, Clementine Barfield and others. And the mission was the same. The mission was Jimmy's mission and Grace's mission. How do you set fire to the younger generation? That was the mission. And so, Grace, we love you. 94, I think we succeeded in that mission. And the question now, as you always say, well, y'all better take advantage of me. I'm not going to be here longer. She's been saying that for 15 years. So let me just share with you part of my introduction, because this introduction came out of those conversations. Grace said, "Carl, you have a story that needs to be told." And we just didn't know the context that the story was going to be told in. But I came out of the 60s as an African American, and I can tell you in no uncertain terms, it was real life in this city and in this country. But in addition to it being real life, one of the issues that we were constantly confronting was, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? It became clear. We could see that we were going to get this goal of attaining black political power. We were going to be able to take over the political institutions in cities like Detroit, where we were in numerical superiority, just by voting. We knew that was going to happen. We were unprepared, though, to govern. And let me say that clearly to all of you, especially the next generation. Be prepared to govern, because that's what you're going to have to do. The protest phase is going to end, and you're going to have to be prepared to govern. And all you got to do is look at the revolutions around the world. There's a whole different contradiction between protest, rebellion, and revolution, and then governing. So, as Grace says, thinking dialectically will help you sharpen your mind and your ideas so that you can not just think like victims, but you can think like winners, as we love to say, as patriots, and to govern. Let me just take a few quotes from my introductions. It's called The Power of Ideas. Ideas have power, and there is power in ideas. This concept was birthed during a very spirited discussion by the organizers of the Boggs Center. Following the death of James Boggs, we formed the Boggs Center because, as his friends, fellow activists, and students, we believed an organization was necessary to carry on his legacy and to train and to develop new generations of activists, leaders, in the tradition of James and Grace Boggs. The American Revolution, Pages from a Negro's Worker's Notebook, is a living testament to the concept that ideas have power and there is power in ideas. Growing up in Detroit and coming of age in the 1960s, we viewed our city as the automobile capital not only of the United States but of the world. Our grandparents and parents have been part of the great migrant stream of African Americans who have been compelled to leave the South in search of jobs and better social opportunities. With them, they brought core values largely learned in the church. 1, work hard at whatever you do. 2, don't be a quitter. 3, be fiercely independent. 4, do the right thing. Live a life free of corruption, both spiritually and morally. 5, continuously give back to others less fortunate than yourself. 6, be a good family man, son, father, husband, brother. And 7, be a good neighbor and citizen. I vividly remember being called into a family meeting by my father and stepfather in 1964 at the age of 17, 1 year before graduating from high school. They cross-examined me about my plans for the future. This was also 1 year after this book was published. The fierce battles that had taken place in the South for civil rights and the emergence of Dr. Martin Luther King as a symbolic leader of the movement were receiving national and worldwide attention. Although Detroit was the center of the union movement, of organizing workers in the automobile industry for better jobs and a livable wage and better working conditions, and had its own struggles against segregation and civil rights, the average young black living in the city of Detroit was not conscious at all of this movement. Berry Gordy's Motown was our national anthem. The characters in the movie Cooley High powerfully captured where we thought we were at the time. During the final scene in Cooley High, Preach, one of the characters, reads a poem at the funeral of his best friend, Cochise, as follows. We were friends a long time ago. We live for today. Basketball nights, laughing, rapping, chasing girls, obeying no laws. No tomorrows, unable to remember yesterday, we live for today. This was the limit of our horizons and our consciousness. We had been acculturated and trained simply to seek employment at a Detroit, Ford, Chrysler, or automobile plant. Going to work in an automobile plant quickly changes you. Like prison, it is one thing to imagine, but it's quite another thing to experience. Working in the automobile plant at the time was hell. It was dirty, dangerous, and hard, very hard. The work, the regiment, the class stratification, the bosses, and the racial segregation and discrimination quickly fill your empty consciousness. New questions and thoughts arise that constantly need answering. Slowly, we became aware of our station at the bottom of the pecking order of life. I'll let you read the rest of it when the book comes out.